Alright, so here's the game plan for today. We're going to warm up, we're going to mobilize a few of our lower body joints and that mid back a little bit. We're going to activate some of our muscles that have to do with jumping and triple extension. And we'll do a couple movements for potentiation. And then as you can see from this very crooked bulleted list here, we're going to work through some progressions for jumping. I kind of talk about how to take it from easier to harder and just some different options that you might have. And that's more or less it. So kind of strap up, shoes on tight, and find some open space. It's not going to need a whole lot of space today. Just looking to have the ability to jump up, jump forward, and jump to the side. So we're going to keep it pretty simple today. This is going to play off of that plyometric video we just watched / listened to, and then we're going to have more plyometrics on our next activity day. And that next activity day is going to have more equipment in, so like we're going to talk about like box jumping and medicine ball work and just things like that. So today is no equipment necessary. You just need a little bit of space. So just make sure you're getting ready there. All right, so what are we going to mobilize? We're going to mobilize our ankles. So you can do this standing. Kind of a tricky, easy one is just to go with a long stance. If you want to do a static stretch on that calf, that's great. For me, when I'm thinking about mobilization, I want to be a little bit more active through it, so some rotations, things like that. So again, the ankle three-way is a pretty easy one. Just to challenge that ankle. Remember, your ankle needs angles. And you could almost do today without a warm-up, but I just want to get in the habit of showing a few different things with warm-ups. And also, it's kind of the end of the day for me, and I'm an old non-athlete now, so I know if I don't warm up, I'm going to end up like regretting it and hurting something. So, yeah. So a little bit of warm-up. We won't be doing this for too long. I'm just going to keep it kind of pretty quick and straightforward today. I think that last lecture we got a lot of information across, whereas that kind of leaves me in a good spot today. I don't have to like ramble or talk too much. Basically just going to knock things out and do like a quick discussion along the way. So still focusing on those ankles. We did our ankle three-way. Now I'm just hitting a down dog, some alternating calf march. Just trying to open that up just a little bit more. Nice. So for my ankles, then we're going to go to hips. Since all we're doing is jumping today, it would probably behoove me to do most of my warm-up standing up a little bit more as opposed to rolling down on the ground. So I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on standing. So we're on to hips now. So I'm going to do some lateral lunges with rotation. So this is going to get my hips opened up, and with that rotation I get just a little bit of T-spine as well. And honestly, coming off of that rotation and pressing back in, I'm getting some glute activation, which I needed in my activation portion anyways. So again, lots of gray area. Let's see if we can just move that down my pocket. Lots of gray area. If something's helping you mobilize and activate, that's cool. Count it for both. So still working on my hips. I'm gonna do some ankle cradles in place. Sometimes I like to do movement along with it, so you might do some little baby steps in between, and that can be a good way to get a big group kind of moving back and forth. And you can have them do, reps for 5 or 10 yards, and then they can do that called the O-line shuffle, because your O-line is always your biggest, heaviest guys, and they're not really good at running because they're so heavy. So when they hustle somewhere, it's always like it's an inconvenience for them. So you can do all kinds of whatever movement you're doing that might be mobilizing those hips. You can do a few reps, 5 to 10 yards, and then give them a jog, or you can keep it all movement based. So we start with some ankle cradles and some quad stretches. Now we're doing some knuckle drags. Let's go crossover kicks. Start low and easy. Build up, get a little bit more aggressive on the way. Again, I'm doing like 4 to 5 yards of activity here. Normally I would lengthen out. I would do 2 to 3 times as much if I was coaching somebody else, or if I was going to do a workout, and not just today's like a demo, but not so much a workout. On those hips, I'm feeling pretty good, but we could just do some prisoner squat right here. And so we can get some squats going, just to get those hips to open up. Once we're down here, we can go hands on the ground. Left hand stays down, right hand goes high. We can go that side for 5 times. That's good. As I work my way into mobilizing the T-spine, that's going to be good. I can switch it over into push-up position and alternating world's greatest stretch for that T-spine. I'm out here on concrete, so pretzels aren't super appealing. Kind of just think about your environment a little bit more and adapt along the way. Nice, I'll leave that at that. T-spine, I did that squat with rotation. I did some world's greatest stretch there. I think I'm gonna leave my T-spine there. Activation, so I like this. I said we don't need equipment for today. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm gonna go with this little ankle band here. So remember, the glutes do 3 things. They are hip extensors, hip abductors, and hip external rotators. So with a band, you can kind of get into all those a little bit. And so for abduction, my knees aren't going to be locked out, but kind of just like a soft bend to them. And I can step to one side for however many reps. On a normal set, I'd probably do like 15 to 20, or I'd time it. But again, this is more of a demo day, so I'm going to kind of put things in a microwave and do a lower volume. So you can go all to one side, or you can alternate there. I can tell you that's not a whole lot of work. My glutes are already talking to me. I'm already firing there. So I was going very lateral. I was staying really within that frontal plane. But if I step back at about a 45-degree angle, I'm going to hit different parts of my glutes, because remember, the glutes abduct, extend, and externally rotate. So what was I doing? 45 degrees out and back. Nice. I can float. I don't have to touch. I can just, oof, oh boy, I'm getting a little balance, a little bit of core in there, even though I'm not supposed to. All right. Really not that hard. Made that look harder than it is. But again, you don't have to touch. You can just float there. Now that I'm balancing, my core is getting like a little bit of work, but this standing glute is being challenged. So even in this short period of time, my glutes are talking to me. Nice. So I'll leave that alone. And honestly, if you don't have that red band, you want to try something really similar, just lay down on the ground and do some side lying leg lifts. Really similar sensation. Doesn't cost any money. You can do it anywhere. It's very efficient and a great time saver. Hamstrings. I'm just going to do some empty-handed RDLs. I'll do, so I'm just hinging right there. I go back till my hamstrings get like a 7 out of 10 stretch, and then I squeeze my glutes to bring me stand tall. And I'll go double leg for several, and I'll do some single legs on each. And again, prior to a true workout, I would do a higher volume on pretty much all of this warming up, but since it's a demo day, I'm going to keep it shorter so that you guys can watch me do a few reps, pause it, and hit it on your own. And also just that the video is shorter so it's more convenient. So I know I don't always keep things succinct, but I think I can do it today. I'm going to try. Hamstrings, calves, so we can warm up the calf muscles, but one of our potentiation movements is going to be the pogo, which is going to kind of pick on those calves a little bit more as well. I've got the quads on here, so I'll combine some quad activation with a little bit of T-spine rotation. So we'll lunge and do a crossover reach. Just like that. We already did some squats as well, so those quads are activated. Core, yeah, I got a little bit of balancing work between my banded work and those single leg RDLs, so there's a little bit of core work in there. But just for where I'm at, 2 movements come to mind. Would be some just body weight good mornings. So right there, really similar movement pattern to the RDL, almost identical, but it's just going to help me focus a little bit more on glute activation. For my purposes today, I'm going to consider my glutes a part of my core. So I've got that. I'm going to hit some shoulder taps. I'll go 6, 3 per side. So now I'm activated. And for potentiation, again, pogos are pretty quick and easy. You can also do some skipping patterns. So you can maybe start with some marches. Into skips. Once you've got that march and skip built, you can start to get fancy with your skips. So you can go A skip, that A skip, hopefully I was emphasizing like a really nice dorsiflexion there. And then that B skip is going to take that dorsiflexion and get my knee up a little bit higher, and then start to activate my posterior chain. So remember, march, and a skip. A skip. B skip. Go a couple more B skip reps, just to see if I get loose. Marching, skipping. A skip. B skip. So trying to strike underneath my hips. You want to tear a hamstring, you get people to sprint and strike with their foot way out in front of them. That B skip can help train getting that foot pretty close underneath your hips. So save some hamstrings. I don't know how good mine looked or how bad they looked, but hopefully you guys can do this better than I can do it. And C skip, I would just consider that a high skip. So kind of connecting all the dots. And again, I would do these movements for 10 to 15 yards. And I'm out here. You can see I'm sweating a little bit. It helps that it's warm and muggy, but you know, the warmth is also doing its job. All right, so go through several movements today. Our foundation, we're going to build everything off of, is going to be off the squat. So we're going to do bilateral squat to start, and we'll build several other movement patterns off of that. And if you remember from our slides that we just went over, the jump is landing on 2 feet. You might be leaving ground from 2 feet or from 1 foot, but that's our jump. Our bound is going from 1 foot to another. Our hop is going from 1 foot to the same foot, and our jop is going from both feet to 1 foot. So once we're done with our squat pattern and our normal jumps, we'll kind of bleed off into some of that other area. So just be listening and be ready for that. Okay, so our regular squat. Think about a bodyweight squat, bar on your back. That's where we're going to squat. This being plyometrics, it doesn't really benefit us to do jumping patterns in plyometrics where our hip joint is getting below our knee. You know, if I'm in a basketball game and I'm squatting like that before I jump up for a rebound, it's going to look a little silly. No, maybe that's how low I'm going to go. So probably not going to operate on the same range of motion or have the same standards that we would on a true squat. And that's why is at that time, think about the Goldilocks rule, is there's a sweet spot for this. So we're probably not going to squat that deep. So we've got our squat pattern down, and then you can go into a drop squat. So on that drop squat, your feet are probably going to be together, hands up, and we're going to stick that landing at the bottom. And again, from a profile, hopefully at the bottom I look almost like an individual who might have some weight on their back. And so I might be going lower on that drop squat than I would on a normal plyometric squat. That's okay. This is our foundation. We're building up our pattern. Teach people how to land before you start challenging them to jump. That's a good safety tip right there. And a lot of times with progressions, sometimes it feels silly to take a lean, muscular, productive 22-year-old college athlete and have them do foundational drills and tasks like this. It almost feels like a time waste. But what I found, because I'm thick-headed and sometimes it takes me a while to figure things out, what I found after basically several years is that when I take a big step back it gives me more room to go forward. And so even though an athlete might be able to come in on day one and on drill one to do some rotational, kind of funky, complex jumping, they might be capable of that, but you're not setting them up for success for a month from then or from 2 months from then. So that's what some of this really kind of Humpty Dumpty, simple activities, this regressed activities can help us and benefit us. So to teach, productive, strong, experienced athletes to work on their landing mechanics, it seems silly, but it pays off because all you do is build off of that and it gives you room to move forward. So we did our drop squat. That drop squat is just from here to here. And a depth drop, we'll do some depth drops on our next video when we have equipment out. And our depth drops is stepping off of a box or a bench and going into that drop squat position. So just catching yourself and really practicing those landing mechanics. So it's like a control jump. Instead of jumping up first and then falling down into a squat and a catch, you're skipping that first jump. So it's much more controlled. And again, it's just a step in the staircase to success, I guess you would say. And then once you've done your depth drops, on our slides in our last video, we just talked about how you would jump up onto a box and the benefits of jumping up onto a box and sticking it, because then you're doing the concentric portion of the rep, but not the eccentric. So it's still it seems like a baby step. It seems kind of silly, but after you do those jumps, and we'll do some of those in our next video. After you do those, it's going to be a squat jump to stick. So think about what your hands are doing. Probably the most common mistake I see people with squatting is they start overthinking it, and they start jumping like that. Kind of silly, right? Well, if you actually want to go upward, you would throw your hands with you. So your hands help you go down. You get that eccentric stimulus, that loading force on your muscle spindle. That muscle spindle sends an afferent nerve impulse to your spine. Your spine sends an efferent nerve impulse back to that muscle spindle, and that agonist muscle contracts and it sends you on your way. So think about that little clip of people tripping on a staircase on the subway in New York. Is that they get caught up and they catch themselves. They don't have time for the nerve impulse to come up here and say, oh, you're about to fall, like be careful and catch yourself, lift your leg and plant. Instead of doing that, it just gets caught, nerve signal comes up here in the spine somewhere, zips back down, we lift our leg and we stop ourselves from knocking all our teeth out on the subway up in New York. So just a reminder, that's what's going on in our stretch shortening cycle. So on our squat jump, we're here, right? I was overthinking a little bit there. I did a poor job of sticking it, right? And what I'm doing right now with those arms, let's take a time out and let's talk about that there. Because I really shouldn't have started with my arms swinging around like that. I should start here with no counter movement, or NCM. No counter movement is going to simplify things. Maybe I wouldn't have fallen over on that first rep. So I'm going to give you guys, we'll go with the frontal angle here. So I'm right here. I'm taking a little pause right here. I'm going to jump and I'm going to stick. So that's no counter movement. My hips aren't doing a counter movement, and my arms, I have no arm swing either. So you have counter movement on your hips and counter movement on your arms. So you can also start tall, drop, squat, and land. So that'd be no counter movement. Your next progression would be counter movement, which is, so I should have started with my hands on hips. And going up next, we'll go to to counter movement. So now I'm full go swinging my arms, just doing what I can to jump as high as I can. Nice. So right there, and hopefully in that video, I'll have to check it later, hopefully I'm not catching like any valgus knee action. So remember, when those knees dive in, that's called a valgus, that's called like knee valgus. And if you're doing it in a controlled setting, weight room, garage, wherever you are, if you're doing a controlled setting, you're probably doing it in competition as well. Because right now I don't really have anything to think about aside from, I don't have anything to think about, but if I was out playing basketball or volleyball or soccer, I wouldn't be thinking at all. I'd be too busy reacting and trying to play my sport and score goals. I wouldn't really be thinking about, okay, where's my knee going? But in here in this setting, that's where we set the groove. We train our athletes that if their knees are coming in, say keep those knees wide. And when you say that, what's probably going to happen is athletes are going to say, oh, okay, and they're going to move their feet out even wider, and then their knees dive in even more. So you have to clarify that there's a happy stance, and that's knee valgus, that's a neutral knee, and that's a wide knee, or varus. So we want neutral or wide knees, preferable to valgus. A valgus knee, you know, if the play changes and you run this way and you plant and that knee goes valgus, your ACL often goes with it. So we don't want that. All right, so what do we have here? We had no counter movement. We had counter movement. And how do we progress it even more? We're going to destabilize it. Give a chance to even drive our stimulation of our nervous system up even more with a double contact. So we'll go, and I don't know if I like that rep. Let's try it again. Double contact. So I'm gonna drop. Let's see here. I'm gonna drop and get double contact. So there it is. That's one. That's two. So I'm gonna reset just a little bit, and you get one wave of a nerve impulse, and then another wave comes in after it to hopefully give you an even greater amortization of muscle fiber activation. And then continuous would be one after the other after the other. So after you've built your platform for sticking your landings, you can go from one to the next to the next. So we'd be here, jump up, and hopefully each time I'm doing exactly what I practiced. So hopefully, if we watch the next few jumps in slow motion, hopefully every time I end up back in that position between reps. And continuous, so each position is less and less stable. And when you destabilize the challenge that the body has to perform, the body has to create more stability. So it's very similar to adding weight or adding intensity. And recall from our slides that your volume of jumping, not very high. You can have rest in there, in between, pretty good amount of rest, usually always a minute on a training day, and you're only training for 10 to 15 minutes. So this is not, I'm sweating and I'm breathing. It's a combination of it being just hot in this room and me being old and not jumping a whole lot. So That's how it goes. So we did our squat jumps with all of our execution. So what's the execution variation? Is it NCM, no counter movement? Is it counter movement? Is it double contact? Is it continuous? Those are our execution types, and you can do that across the spectrum of plyometric types. We did our squat jumps, kind of ran through all those. We didn't do any broad jumps. And I like a broad jump. There's arguments and there's science that's going to show, all right, so many sports require sprinting, and there's benefits to having ability to jump upward, like a vertical jump, but a forward jump is going to be a little bit, depending on what research you're looking at, is going to be a little bit more relevant and carry over more to sprinting, because sprinting is a forward motion, right? So depending on what you're looking at, it would sort of back up that statement. So a broad jump is going to be a good predictor of sprint speed. And on that broad jump, it would be, depending on your jump style, no counter movement. You could do the double contact, you can do continuous. So single broad jump is going to be there. I'm going to try that again, see if I can stick my landing. I wasn't really dialed in, so start with your basics. Oh, still not a great rep. I'll try one last time. And again, that's a good reminder that sometimes you got to gauge your intensity and give that up for more control. So I was not controlled. I was kind of fired up from all my vertical jumps there. So I changed my movement. I probably should have rolled back my intensity and my effort, my style there. So we've got broad jumps, and just like we mix it up, we could connect them. We could go two jumps like that. We can do several. Again, once you start getting past maybe 6 high effort jumps, I noticed there's kind of a breakdown in technique and form. And remember, that phosphagen system, it's not the most trainable attribute. So for plyometrics, make sure you're discerning, is this energy system training? Is this muscle training? Is this work capacity? Is this power training? Because when we're doing plyometrics and we're doing power training, we're attacking our nervous system, not so much the muscles or the energy system. So just keep in mind that I've said many times that the goal is to keep the goal the goal. Just remember that if you're going to do a power session and all of a sudden you got people like doing bear crawls and tire flips till they throw up, you probably got distracted along the way and you're no longer training for power. So just keep that in mind. So that's what continuous broad jumps would look like, one after the other moving forward. Let's see, of all the jumps we've done, now with broad jumps, I've probably seen, I'm counting the same athletes jumping on different occasions. I've probably seen, I don't know, several thousand broad jumps. I've only seen one athlete get injured during all those broad jumps. But it bugged me and it bothered me, and I started thinking about, well, how could I do a similar test that's safer? And I started thinking, well, if I just had them jump off of one leg, they're not going to jump as far, and then I could have them land on 2 legs, and that would give me what I would want, and I would just record their right foot jump distance and their left foot jump distance. So I've been doing that for a few years. Again, that is like that was a freakazoid injury that happened. But I've convinced myself that, a broad jump testing from 1 foot to 2 foot is beneficial and slightly safer. So that's arguable, but it's kind of how I feel about it. But to train that way is not a bad idea either, because the only sport where you're doing that is like a potato sack race. So our athletes are always operating off of 1 foot, right? It's always a 1 foot jump. Now training with 2 feet is fine. It's going to benefit the single foot, but training on a single foot jump is going to more directly correlate to what's going on the field or the court in my eyes. So all of those jump variations we just did, the verticals, the broads, we can go from 1 foot to 2 foot and sort of get that power output and that safer landing. So I kind of like that about it. So you can go linear, and then you start going sort of lateral, and then you might start going rotational after that. So that's how I would progress the direction of jumping. I guess stationary, like vertical, would be sort of step 1, and then going forward would be step 2, and then going more lateral would be step 3, and then throwing in some rotation would be sort of step 4 on that. A bound would be a jump from 1 foot onto another, 1 foot onto another. And it's real tricky. It's real trippy watching yourself in a video camera, and I've got my shadow back behind me. Hopefully that's not so goofy for you guys. So 1 foot. Oh man! All right, here we go. Focus. 1 foot back to another. There we go. That's starting to look reasonable. And that's a bound. You can do a vertical bound. You can do a forward bound. I like a lateral broad jump quite a bit, or a lateral bound. So you can go just over and stick, and then you can progress that, and you can go side to side. You can go side to side slow. You can go fast, like that. So lots of progressions there for bounds, and we'll see. We'll see bounds again on probably our speed day. I'll bring that back out on a different setting, a bigger open setting. But you got 45-degree bounds, and you've just got linear bounds. So I'll leave it at that for now. But we'll see a different type of bounding on one of our speed days. Our hops are going to be 1 foot, back on that same foot. We can go stationary, we can go forward, we can go lateral. I'm probably not going to, I guess I could jump in the frontal plane and go lateral. I just don't think I'd go very far. So it'd be kind of silly. So I'm going to do a 45 degree instead of a true frontal plane jump. So 45 degrees there. I lost it, so that's the one I could work on. That's going to be an especially good one because, again, we talked about how that knee valgus is going to cause or be linked to some ACL issues in play or in training. So if we're going on a hop from 1 foot to 1 foot, and we're going 45 degrees, well, all that shear stress coming through is going to very closely mimic what's going to be tempting to do a knee valgus. So that'd be a good one to keep into the charts. Guess we haven't rotated. So rotating jump, be here. You could do 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. You can do 360 jumps. A rotational bound would be here. A rotational hop would be here. Oh, missed it. Let's try that again on the other foot. rotational hop right there. And you can combine those. You can travel and rotate. You can do all your arm swings. You can go continuous or not continuous. And then the JOP, J-O-P. The JOP is going to be the most advanced of these movements. And just like I wanted to tell that story about the broad jump injury that I witnessed, because this is the inversion of it, is that I was talking about why I like a one-footed jump onto a two-footed landing, because it's so much safer. You get all the power output and you're not going to injure somebody on the landing. Well, the JOP has great logic for doing it, but it's going in the opposite direction. It's making sure that we are able to stabilize on a single leg under higher than normal circumstances of stress and stimulus. So it's going to be 2 feet to 1 foot, and I missed that there. So it's harder. A soft jump from 2 feet is going to send me further than a fairly hard jump from 1 foot, right? So I'll try that JOP again. 2 to 1, and then you might. A lot of people get into JOP matrices where they are doing all kinds of funny angles through it. For me, if I can get an athlete doing a jump just linear like that, I would not have them do like a full big broad jump into a JOP, because that's going to be into a single leg stick, because that's going to be a whole lot of stress. I would not do that maybe ever, but definitely not in the first several sessions. So I would do a bunch of this other stuff before I worked my way up to a JOP, and then once I'm jopping, I would be pretty serious about using my progressions of like no counter movement, and then once we are maybe doing a counter movement, I would say counter movement with a 50% effort on the broad jump, because I would want to come out soft. Like you guys saw, I've missed a lot of landings today, but my first JOP I missed as well. So I would keep that in mind, that for that JOP, once you actually get to a counter movement double leg jump to a single leg stick, and I mean that was like a 25% effort there, and I still barely landed it. So probably doesn't say much about me, but also just let it be a warning to you that there's a lot of pressure and force coming from a 2-footed jump onto a 1-footed landing. That's rough. So if you can get athletes to that point, baby them and work them up. Just be nice to them. So maybe you've taken their broad jumps and you want to give them a percentage of distance to challenge the jump, or you might just say do a 20% effort, or just start them out with like 6-inch jump and go up by 6 inches, every week for several weeks, and then you have a pretty impressive JOP on your hands. So again, that's one thing that I did. I kind of rolled my eyes at early on, was coaches taking these young, healthy, fit athletes who can run around, they can slam basketballs, they can dunk basketballs, and they can do flying headers on the soccer field, score goals, and then they would have them practicing landing mechanics. And I used to roll my eyes at that, but then I kind of noticed that, if I start with JOPs or big box jumps, I don't really have anywhere to go. It's kind of like playing your ace on the first round of betting, is you don't have any like cards up your sleeve. So just keep that in mind, is that it's kind of silly to have some of these regressions, and even though athletes can do more, what you're doing is maybe when you start a new training cycle, you might be behind what they're capable of, but you're building a foundation, and the bigger foundation you build, it's kind of like a pyramid. A pyramid can only be as tall as it is wide. So when we build these bigger foundations and we add in sort of these rinky-dinky exercises and these drills, we're building a wide base for that athlete, so that hopefully they can reach higher performance levels than they ever have before. Awesome. We'll see you next time for our Plyometric day 2, and we're going to bring in some equipment and some toys. So that'd be a good one to have access to a gym to, or just get creative. Great, we'll see you guys soon.